Hello and welcome to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from the fine folks at Awful Announcing, where it is Awfulies season. We're coming to you live 2 p.m. on Wednesday, December 17th. I'm Drew Lerner, joined by the amazing Ben Axelrod, a senior editor here at Awful Announcing. And we're going to reveal some of the 2025 Awfully Award winners today. But first, we have some pretty big news in our world here, Ben. And that is that Barstool's Pardon My Take is headed to Netflix in 2026. Top line takeaways from what is a pretty massive business move in this industry.
Yeah, well, it's not just Pardon My Take. It came out just a little bit ago that it's a wider ranging partnership with Barstool, where it will also be Spit and Chicklets and the Ryan Russillo Show, in addition to Pardon My Take. And so looking at it from that perspective, it's very similar to the Spotify deal that Netflix reached back in October. And so here we are 2 weeks away from 2026. And at some point in the next month here, it sounds like we're going to have podcasts from Spotify and The Ringer, and including the Bill Simmons podcast and the Zach Lowe Show. And we're going to have podcasts from Barstool, and including Pardon My Take and Spit and Chicklets and the Ryan Russillo Show, all on Netflix. Video exclusive. They'll still be available on audio platforms, but I mean, this is something we've been talking about on this show, I think, since its inception, is when is Netflix going to dip its toes in the podcasting game? And Netflix isn't just dipping its toes, it's going full cannonball in. So I think you can see a pretty natural division here between Netflix and YouTube in terms of vying for exclusivity with video podcasts. And when at least in the sports field, which is obviously the field that we are best versed in and the field that we cover, they're going to have, I mean, if we did a draft, I think Pardon My Take and the Bill Simmons Show would go 1 and 2. So they're going to have the two biggest sports podcasts behind their paywall, Netflix, that is. So it's definitely massive news, and it's going to be fascinating to see the way this continues to evolve.
Yeah, when I saw this news come across my timeline this morning, that my mind immediately went towards the Paramount, Warner Brothers, Netflix whole debacle that's happening right now, where Paramount is trying to argue essentially that Netflix is not actually competing with YouTube. But this type of deal kind of proves that that's completely false. Like, Netflix and YouTube are competitors. It doesn't matter that Netflix is, producing what they're calling premium video, that, they're also getting into video podcasts. Like, they realize that YouTube is just so dominant when it comes to like minutes spent on platform, because they have these long form podcasts where people just throw them on, they hang out, it's very low stakes, but people are spending a lot of time on YouTube because of that. And Netflix wants a part of that audience. It's going to be very hard for Paramount to make a legal argument that, like, no, Netflix is not actually competing with YouTube and Google and TikTok and whatever for time spent. Everyone is kind of competing on the same playing field here in the attention economy. That was my main takeaway. But from a sports perspective, I think you're completely on target, Ben, that like Netflix is making a huge play for some of the biggest sports podcasts in the industry. I'm wondering, my question to you is, like, I don't know if you consume these podcasts through video more frequently than you do through audio, but like, are you going to actually change your consumption habits because, the Bill Simmons Show or Pardon My Take might be on Netflix now?
I don't typically consume podcasts through video, so it doesn't really affect me all that much. I will say, like, in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis, I do wind up going to the YouTube version of Bill Simmons' podcast on a pretty frequent basis. And so that's going to be different in terms of, will I, for the ways I use that in terms of getting clips and things of that nature. Like, I don't think I'll be able to do that on Netflix. So from a day-to-day work habit consumption, that will change for me. In terms of viewing, like I said, I don't typically watch video podcasts. I'm more of an audio podcast person. It feels like a higher barrier of entry to watch a podcast on Netflix than it does YouTube for some reason. And yet, if I'm doing it like on my Roku TV, it's pretty much the same process. It's just going to a different app, but I don't know if it's the password or what it is, but something about it just feels different going to Netflix. So I do wonder if it will change, and I think that's been one of the big questions. Dan Lebitard raised this point when he was talking about the Bill Simmons deal: is like, does it decrease the reach of those podcasts? And I definitely see that argument, but I also think what they're banking on is like, hey, these are very loyal audiences that we're buying into here. And we're hoping that either they already have Netflix subscriptions or this is what's going to be what pushes them to one.
Right. That's kind of like where I'm landing on this is, I kind of go to Netflix. Maybe I'm kind of in the minority here, but I go to Netflix if there's something I know I want to watch. Like, I'm not just flipping on Netflix and scrolling through what they're offering. If I don't know what I want to watch, I'm opening YouTube and I'm just letting the algorithm kind of serve me what it thinks I want to see. So this, I think, would be a big change, because when it comes to like podcasts, at least for me, like especially those types of sports podcasts, a lot of my consumption is like literally going on the YouTube app, getting served like clips from these shows that, might be 5-10 minutes in length, and they're just coming up on my algorithm. I'm not going to see that now. It seems like, I don't know if like what the rules are regarding like short clips, like if they'll be able to do that on YouTube still, but like, am I just no longer going to be served, pardon my take, or Bill Simmons clips because like they're on Netflix now? Because to me, that's like a big part of how I consume these shows.
Yeah, definitely. And I would throw TikTok in there too. I mean, I don't think you could get the clips off of TikTok, but that's a whole industry. It's just podcast. We do it. We put podcast clips on TikTok and you hope they take off there. So that's definitely a part of this. I do wonder if this will signal, though, a change for Netflix in terms of, because I'm the same way. It's like I go to Netflix because I know there's the Diddy documentary I want to watch there. There's Quarterback or WWE Unreal. Like there's something there I want to watch. I do wonder if like this will mark kind of a pivot to not fully for the app, but at least like almost like a fast channel type of vertical where it's like, hey, you put on our podcast channel and you're going to get Bill Simmons, and then you're going to get Pardon My Take, and then you're going to get Spit and Chicklets, and then you're going to get the Zach. Like if it's going to turn into something that you can just kind of leave on in the background as a daily sports show consumption, that to me would be the appealing part about all of this. But I haven't seen anything one way or the other to indicate that's what Netflix is trying to do.
Yeah, and you can have L. Duncan come on between episodes and give you some quick hitter news. The headlines on the hour. That could very well be kind of like the model that Netflix tries going for, because I do think it is just much more of like you're actively opting in if you're trying to watch Bill Simmons or Pardon My Take on Netflix, whereas like YouTube, it can very much just like fall in your lap. So it'll be interesting to see if the consumption of these shows drops off at all. I would say probably only marginally, because I think you're right. Like these shows in particular, like they're the biggest podcasts in the space. Like they have loyal audiences. I think this is a really shrewd deal from Netflix.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a high bar because on YouTube, they clear. I was looking, Bill Simmons and Pardon My Take episodes routinely generate hundreds of thousands of views. But obviously YouTube has a ton of global reach. Netflix has a lot of global reach too. And so it's going to be really interesting to follow. I think as we pivot here toward the year that was with the Awfulies, I think looking ahead, Netflix and podcasts and Netflix in the sports space is already kind of threatening to be the story of 2026.
Yeah, maybe this is ripe for a prediction column, which I'm sure we'll get plenty of in the next few weeks. But that's a great segue, Ben, to move on to the year that was, the 2025 Awfully Awards, our year-end roundup of the best and the worst in sports media. And Ben, I think you really got us off to a strong start this week. interviewing Pablo Torre, who we named Sports Media Person of the Year for 2025. And just to give people a little bit of a behind the scenes on our editorial process for the Awfulies, normally we put it up to a vote for the staff, and we have some discussions between us about who is most deserving to win some of these categories. We did not do that here with Pablo Torre. I think it was a just complete unanimous decision. There was really no other person that I think we could have put up that would have even competed with Pablo for Sports Person of the Year. So why don't you tell me why that is, and why 2025 was such a successful year for Pablo Torre?
Yeah, I mean, as I recall it, I think I probably first floated it in June, and in around the time he was doing his NFLPA reporting, which came on the heels of all the Jordan Hudson stuff and the NBA gambling stories that he had reported. And it was definitely before the aspiration and Kawhi Leonard stuff really took off toward the start of September. And I think I just said, like, hey, like, I think Pablo is probably going to be our person of the year. And everybody agreed. And then maybe there was a moment where I probably floated Dave Portnoy, and it's like, well, this Portnoy thing is like kind of taking off with the mainstream and Fox and all that. And then once the aspiration stuff came out, it was like, okay, like, hey, do we all agree Pablo's our guy? And we were like, yeah, Pablo's our person of the year. And so looking back, we've done this award now 3 years. The first year it was Pat McAfee. The second year it was Tom Brady. And the third year it was Pablo Torre. And so person of the year, it's not always like who had the best year, who did this, who did that. It's like who defined the year from a sports media perspective. And I have a hard time coming up with anybody, again, outside of Dave Portnoy, maybe, like, who you would look back at 2025 and say had a bigger year in the sports media space than Pablo Torre. I think what he's done with Pablo Torre Finds Out is, like, at the root of that show, it is old school principled journalism, but he's found a way to pivot it toward the algorithm, to pivot it toward YouTube, to pivot it toward podcasts. Like, it is a very modernized show. And yet at its core, it is the most traditional journalism cover otherwise know about that you could possibly have. And so I think you look at all that. I think you look at the stories that he was involved in, Jordan Hudson and Bill Belichick, the NFLPA, the NBA gambling, obviously aspiration. He made his entry into discovering what was in, or at least reporting on what was in the Epstein files a couple of weeks ago with the Tom McMillan story. So I just think, like, when you look back at the year that was in sports media of 2025, Pablo Torre's work stands out far and above everybody else's. And so I think this is a very worthy winner of this award.
When you talked to him, what did he identify as kind of the biggest reason that his show kind of blew up in the way that it did this year? I mean, the show's been out since, like, I want to say 2023, maybe even a little bit earlier. Yeah. And it always covered interesting topics, and it was unique in the sports media podcast space, but the investigative journalism aspect of it, I think, really hit its stride this year with some of the major stories he broke. Did he kind of let you in on any of the process that his team does, or how they identify stories they want to pursue, and why, like, that formula has just been so successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so it started in September 2023, and that's literally the first question that I asked him is, like, what about 2020? Like, did you enter 2025 and you're like, we're just going to kill it? Like, what, like, why was this year the year it took off? Because the show has been around. It's gone viral. I mean, it's been a show that people watch. And I think it really found its footing. And this is what he described to me in, obviously it does the thing where it takes stupid things seriously, but, like, embracing its journalistic roots and embracing that it like uncovering things that people wouldn't otherwise find out about it. And what he said specifically was, the more he, like, stays on top of a story, the more it kind of unravels and the more he finds out. And I think it reached a point where he was reporting on stories specifically, I think, with Jordan Hudson, the NFLPA, and Aspiration, where the stories were getting a lot of mainstream attention, and that was just taking him further into the rabbit hole. So I think that was the main thing that stood out to him. Was, I think maybe in the past he would do an episode and it was like, okay, that was our Jordan Hudson story. But this year it was like, let's stick with the story. Let's see how far we can take this. Let's see how far we can push this. And yeah, I mean, he kind of acknowledged the same thing, that 2023 was the year, he was doing a good show and he was doing a strong show and a popular show, but this was the year it became like a meme. Like, this was the year that it really entered. Like, it would not be surprising to see Pablo Torre like be impersonated on SNL. Like it really went to a different level this year.
Yeah, the mainstreaming of it has been what's really caught me off guard. Like, I was just like on the Steelers subreddit like earlier this week, and someone posted a meme about like, oh, Pablo is about to like find out who Aaron Rodgers' like spouse is, like,
yeah,
it's like still a mystery, and he's like even engaging with that and like teasing that on Twitter, like, oh yeah, maybe I do know about Aaron Rodgers' spouse. Like, pretty much any mystery, any investigation, any like big news break that happens now, people are like, all right, Pablo, it's your turn, like, get on this. And that's like super unique, like a super unique place to be in media, because I mean, I think you and I would both agree traditional media has really gone away from investigative reporting, and it's something that takes a lot of investment, a ton of legwork. You need a big team to do it, which I think Pablo's been very transparent about, like the value of his whole team there. And it's just like incredible. It's just incredible that in 2025, like when everyone else is going away from this genre of reporting, Pablo's kind of come in and filled the gap. And it's not even like it's all sports related too. Like, I think he likes to use sports as a hook, but he's really expanded into many, many spaces throughout the course of the year. Do you think this is like sustainable? Did you ask him anything about like along those lines?
Well, it's funny because the last question I asked him was just, a pretty boilerplate. What are your goals? What are your ambitions for 2026? And I did get the sense like he is tired. Like, he's like, the first thing he said was to spend more time with my family and to not be constantly intertwined. Because a lot of these stories overlap. And so it's like he's going down the NFLPA rabbit hole while also working on the Aspiration stuff. There's a more fun story about Sam Presti's rap album that he wants to get to. And so I do get the sense he's tired. But I also think a big part of like why it was so successful in 2025 is the more popular it gets and the more mainstream it gets. I don't want to say it gets easier, but you do become that person that people are going to reach out to and say like, hey, I have a hook like on this. I have a scoop on this. And so I don't think that's going to go away. I saw, it was actually funny. I was prepping to post our story and I saw the exact same post that you did about somebody calling for him to find out who Aaron Rodgers' spouse is. And so he is, that was the other funny thing. And I brought this up with him was, I think one of the funnier moments, maybe not funny considering the nature, but he teased the story. It was an offshoot of the NFLPA story, and it was about SAG-AFTRA, and Brian Smith, one of the directors there, and he teased it by reposting somebody tweeting at him, we need to get Pablo Torre to find the Epstein list. And he said, my next story was inspired in part by this post. And the immediate reaction was, holy shit, Pablo Torre found the Epstein list. And I was like, do you ever worry about overpromising and under-delivering? And he said, yeah, like that's like the gift and the curse of all of that. So to answer your question, though, I don't think it's going to slow down, because my biggest takeaway from my interview with him was just how much he cares about this kind of stuff and how much he cares about journalism. And he's openly acknowledged to me and for Joe, to Joe Budden, that this is the lane he has carved out. Like, he is the investigative journalism guy now in a time where it's otherwise not financially incentivized to be that person. And so I think he cares deeply about it. I think he's going to keep on the beat, but yeah, maybe maybe instead of like 5 or 6 overarching investigations in 2026 that kind of dominate the year, it will be more like 3 or 4.
It's so awesome, like to
Yeah.
see it. It's like kind of it. I feel like it was just so organic how the podcast grew into this, and I just can't think of anyone that would be more deserving of sports person of the year than Pablo Torre. Let's go ahead and move on to some of our other Awfulies, because there are many very deserving people in sports media that are being awarded these very prestigious awards this week, Ben. First, I'll do a little bit of self-promotion. This morning, we awarded the top media story of 2025. Sorry, the top sports media story of 2025. And this one, I think we all kind of settled on kind of an amalgamation of stories. And we said that the evolution of ESPN, because it was just a very big year for ESPN as a business and as a consumable product, really. They launched their direct-to-consumer app. They struck a deal with the NFL, selling 10% of themselves to the NFL in exchange for NFL Network and NFL Red Zone. They redid their entire Major League Baseball deal to switch into local rights rather than national rights, which is a big deal. And they continue to kind of lean into the McAfee of it all and lean into sports debate and sports personalities as part of their daytime programming rather than, the more standard Sports Center fare, which we've talked about a lot on this show about how, their investigative journalism arm it has kind of fallen by the wayside and their inability to kind of handle bigger stories these days. So I think when we look back at 2025, just how ESPN has changed overall and how it's setting itself up for the future with its new app, with the NFL deal, I think to me, that is the defining story of sports media this year. And I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, to once again go behind the scenes of how we vote on this stuff, we go through, we poll all the staff here at Awful Announcing, and then we visit the results and kind of like decipher, like, okay, like, is this our winner, or like, do we want to revote here? Because a lot of times it's either not decisive or it is tied. And so it's like, we need to figure out like what the process is. Do we trim it down and revote? It's not a one size fits all type of thing, but it's generally, it's an editorial process. For this one, as I recall it, like it was pretty just evenly split between the ESPN app and the ESPN NFL deal, which are two stories we covered extensively. And as we talked it out, it was like, these are two things that, yes, they happened this year, but the effects are going to be felt years down the line. And so you can kind of see the way ESPN is setting itself up now for its future. And so I think the evolution of ESPN, that's like the perfect way to term it, because I think there's a lot of overlap, obviously, between this NFL deal and the ESPN app. But I don't think either of them were necessarily the defining story of the year. But I do think when you look at ESPN's approach to 2025 and the way it is setting itself up for the future and the streaming aspect of it all, I do think this is the story of the year. And I mean, even throwing the McAfee thing in there, it's kind of funny. One thing we write about a lot about Pat. We criticize Pat sometimes. We criticize ESPN for its handling of Pat. One thing I will say about ESPN, to their credit, is they stand by Pat McAfee. Like, they're like, this is our approach. This is our guy. I can't think of one time ESPN has said anything publicly or privately that would make me think they are upset with Pat McAfee. And that spans all the way back to the Aaron Rodgers stuff, through the Donald Trump stuff, through like ESPN stands by Pat McAfee. And so I think that says a lot about their strategy and their vision, whether you agree with it or not. So I think you add it all up, and yeah, I mean, this year was about the evolution of ESPN, and it will be interesting to see the way it takes shape heading into 2026.
Yeah. Even when McAfee and his guests are targeting one of Disney's most front-facing employees in Jimmy Kimmel, still not a peep from ESPN about Pat McAfee. But I think that sums it up well. Let's get to some of the other categories here. I'm going to run through our top play-by-play and color commentators for the year as voted by the Awful announcing staff. Overall play-by-play announcer, the Awfully goes to Mike Tirico. Joe Buck takes the NFL. Joe Davis for Major League Baseball. Kevin Harlan, our top NBA play-by-play announcer. Sean McDonough getting the college football nod. And then Ian Eagle as the best college basketball announcer of the year. Anything stand out to you of the top play-by-play announcers?
I think the interesting part would be Tirico getting overall, but not getting an individual one. He was pretty close to Joe Buck. They might have even been tied, and we had to split that one. And we knew Tirico was pretty unanimous, I'd say, for overall. I don't think he was totally unanimous, but he was the decisive winner. And so that's interesting, but I think that makes sense. Like, I think a big part of Tirico's year was getting back on NBA and showing the versatility there and all he added with NBA. So I think that's perfectly valid. But yeah, I think all the other ones were, other than Tirico and Buck both at the top for NFL in terms of just play-by-play, most of them were pretty decisive.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think Tirico taking the overall makes a lot of sense. Adding the NBA on top of the NFL. Well, there's no one else doing that at the highest level other than Tirico. So yeah, he's a very unique person in that regard. Moving on to the analysts, we have a repeat for the best overall and best NFL color commentator of 2025, with Greg Olson taking both honors. For Major League Baseball, Ron Darling as the best analyst of the year. NBA, Tim Legler. And college football, Joel Klatt. Oh, and sorry, college basketball, Robbie Hummel. So we got Greg Olson, Ron Darling, Tim Legler, Joel Klatt, Robbie Hummel as our best color commentators of the year. I'll go ahead and say the one that stood out most to me was Robbie Hummel of that list. He's definitely like the lowest profile. I mean, I guess that kind of comes with the territory of being a college basketball analyst, but he's certainly like one of the most well-regarded in the sport. If you kind of just look at social media reactions to him, to me, he like sounds like a carbon copy of Jay Billis, like, which is kind of wild. I like Jay Billis a lot. I'm sure he got votes for this category too, but I think it was good to honor Robbie Hummel as a bit of an up-and-comer in this category.
Yeah, Jay Billis got my vote, but Robbie Hummel, I definitely deserving. Very popular. He, even on the NBA stuff that he's been doing with Peacock, I've been a big fan. So I think Robbie Hummel is clearly like going to be calling Final Fours within the next decade and probably sooner than that. So I think this one will age well. What stood out to me about the analysts is how tough of a time I had picking a college football one. Which is interesting to me because it's, I think you could argue, the number 2 sport in the country behind the NFL. And I didn't have like anybody who stood out to me. I think like Greg McElroy got my vote. And a part of me wondered if like college analysts are too online and like how much like I associate Kirk Herbstreit's online persona with Kirk Herbstreit, the color commentator, and how much same for Joel Klatt to be transparent. Like there are some guys who they're online and their podcast personas maybe taint the way I feel about them as pure game analysts. And so that's what stood out to me is like most of them I had like, oh, I really like this guy. I really like this guy. This is my guy here. College football, it's like there is not a college football analyst I feel particularly enthralled with in 2025.
That's a great point. Like whenever I listen to Herbstreit on both college and NFL, I'm like thinking to myself, like he's like really good at this. I actually enjoy listening to him, but he's so insufferable like everywhere else. Like I think he's like pretty hard to listen to on College Game Day, and then the Twitter shit is just unbelievable. So it does like kind of completely taint his image. And I think I actually skipped voting for that category because I just didn't think there was anyone that was deserving in my mind. But glad that we were able to honor Joel Klatt because I do think he is also great at his job. So congratulations to Joel. going to run through a few other categories here, Ben. Laura Rutledge getting the best sideline reporter for 2025. NBC's Terry McCauley as the best rules analyst of the year. Don't think we really need to go over those other than, I think we both would agree Laura Rutledge is probably like one of the best sideline reporters just in general right now.
Well, that one I would say the define, like why she won, I think, and as we were going over it, was her reporting on the Sugar Bowl and the New Orleans terrorist attack on New Year's Day, which almost a year ago now. So as you vote on it, it feels, like a lifetime ago. But the reporting she did there, to go back to Pablo, was like real journalism. It was like, and it was about as serious of a subject as you could come up with. And so she owned that story, not just for ESPN, but for ABC News. And the fact it was a terrorist attack on Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve, and it was impacting this college football playoff. I think it was a quarterfinal Sugar Bowl, and the game ultimately got delayed, and it's breaking news on New Year's Day. And Laura Rutledge is just like on top of it all. That to me was like, she won that award. I mean, she's a great, I pick her every year in our NFL announcers draft. I love Laura Rutledge's work, but I think what separated her for this award was her work on the Sugar Bowl and in New Orleans on New Year's Day.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. We'll run through the rest of the categories pretty quickly and get you guys out of here. So, best studio host of 2025, we have Ernie Johnson winning that award. I'd imagine he's a multi-time winner at this point of that Awfully. The Charles Barkley Best Studio Analyst of 2025, which was retired this year because Charles Barkley would win it every year if we didn't retire it, goes to Ryan Fitzpatrick, which I think he's a very deserving winner for Thursday Night Football's studio coverage. Best Debate Personality of 2025, we have FS1's Nick Wright, I think a back-to-back winner in that category as well. Best Studio Show went to Inside the NBA. No surprise there. Best Sports Debate Show of 2025, Pardon the Interruption. Best Talent Acquisition of 2025 was ESPN getting Peter Schrager's services. And today we released these as well. Best Sports Media Insider of 2025, Jeff Passan. Best Sports Reporter of 2025, Pablo Torre, which makes sense given he was our Sports Person of the Year. Anything from those categories stand out to you, Ben?
It stood out to me how decisive Jeff Passan was as the winner, which is interesting because he's an ESPN, he's a transaction newsbreaker for the most part. But he doesn't get like caught up in a lot of the same bullshit that Adam Schefter seems to get caught up in, and that Shams Charania sometimes gets caught up in. Like, there's not really anything polarizing or controversial about Jeff Passan. He just like kills it on the MLB beat and actually is like pretty hard on baseball when he wants to be. So I thought that was interesting. And then, I thought Ryan Fitzpatrick getting that almost felt like on behalf of that entire Thursday Night Football crew, which has really separated itself, I think, in terms of NFL studio shows. I liked that one as well.
Yeah, I think if we ever retire that category for Inside the NBA, the Thursday Night Football pregame show probably would have a really good shot at taking that one home in the future. So I agree with you there. Everyone, the Awfulies are still going on. We will have more awards for you Thursday and Friday. Some of the upcoming categories, some of the biggest categories actually in the Awfulies: Best Sports Media Moment, Best Sports Media Beef. I like that category. That's new this year. And then also the fan favorite Worst Sports Media Moment of 2025. Those will all come to you guys tomorrow. We have some more slated for Friday, so keep an eye out on awfulannouncing.com to get all the latest Awfully Award winners. Ben, tomorrow I understand that it'll be you, Brendan, and our guy Sam Newman joining the show for a college football announcer draft. So get ready for that. I will see you guys next week as we head into the holiday season. Thank you for joining us, and good afternoon.